Hello everyone, this is Diane and I have 2 domestic arts journals completed and ready to go in my shop. This video will be shown on Monday, so I will list the journals, gotta glue that down a little bit, Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't know the date, but I don't even know what today's date is, but the Monday after this video goes up, it'll be listed in my shop. I mean, the day that this video goes up, it'll be in my shop at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's take a look at them to see what is in them. They are quite thick. They're made with quilting books. They're sister books made by the same company, I believe. I didn't even pay attention to who published them. Excuse me, but one is romantic patchwork and quilting and the other is country patchwork and quilting, and they're quite large. The width is 8.5 inches and the height is 10 1/4. The spine is 2.5 inches. There are 3 signatures. For the tie, I just took some of my strips of quilting fabric that someone sent me, and I just selected several pieces and sewed them together, and then I just sewed around the edges to prevent too much fraying. When I joined the pieces together, I used a fancy stitch, but the other stitching is just a straight stitch. So it's a nice long enough tie to tie around that if you would like to. I had a lot of fun embellishing the covers of these. I did do a video on making decorating the covers. So I just added this vintage soft loopy trim that came to me from Eva from Switzerland. Thank you, Eva. I loved being able to put that there. This is vintage pom-pom that I got at a flea market. Lighting's not great, is it? There's a really pretty log cabin quilt on the front. On the edge here, I just put a strip of fabric, and this piece was cut like that, so I thought it was really cool, and I added it to the edge. And then this piece also is vintage. A vintage, well, I don't know how vintage this yo-yo is. Yeah, I think this is one of my really old ones. And the fabrics wrap around the edge. I used this soft waffle weave fabric, and it was actually, I don't know what it was a piece of, but there was a very thin quilt batting and a piece of fabric behind it, and it was all sewn together, so I didn't take it apart. So it's not real thick, but it's a nice spine. I love that country look, even though this is the romantic. I thought this looked more country, but anyway, I thought this looked nice with it. You might have seen that I did a goof on the back, and I'll get to that in a minute. But this is vintage braid trim that I found at a flea market, and I was glad to have a place to put that. Here's where the goof came in. I put it on the back, but I put it on while it was open like this, and then when I closed it, it's not straight, and it kind of comes around to the edge, to the spine. So I want to point that out, so you won't, if you purchase it, you won't get it and say, hey, I didn't know that was like that, because now you know it's like that. It wouldn't bother me if it was my journal. These are kind of primitive looking. You'll see when you get inside, I used black messy stitching and hodgepodge of stuff, so they're not like perfected journals. They're just really fun, messy, chunky journals. Kind I love making. There was a barcode here, so I just added some vintage fabric and that piece of fabric. This just fell out of something. I hope I remember where to put it when I get to it. On the inside, this is the original end paper, which I wouldn't have put on with this, but that's what came with the book, and I do like it, so I left it. This is one of the images from the book. I cut it out. I am going to let that go to voicemail. Sorry about that. I cut it out and glued it to cardstock and put it on as a tuck spot. And this is one of Rachel's labels, digital labels from Roxy Creations on Etsy. This is one of the cards that I just got at the antique mall or flea market yesterday when I went with my friend, and you should have seen the video on Saturday, I believe. So I had kept the quilt cards out from the set of picture cards that I got. I just added a little bit of fabric and tucked it in there. You can journal on the back. There is some fabric here that came with a quite large fabric sampler set that somebody sent me in a Happy Mail some time ago. I really love the pattern on them. Here's one of the large cards that I bought at that antique mall. I did trim a little bit off both edges and then rounded the corners, but it's a I'd say 1970s Mixmaster beater. The cards were 1980, but pictures were probably taken in the 70s. So the pages are made with scraps of scrapbook paper that I've had sewn together to make a large enough page, and then some of the pockets are smaller scraps sewn together. This one has a little strip of vintage fabric there. Some of the pages are double-sided and some are white on the back, the pieces that I sewed together. This is from a book about log cabin quilts. Not this one. It was a paperback book that was all log cabin books, and I love these pages because there's so much space for writing on, and yet there is a design on it. I just wrapped a piece of fabric over the edge. This is from a binder of knitting designs, and it was one of the pages that opens out. It's in the binder, but it opens out, so I was able to put them in the signature that way. This image is from the book. Love that little house, and I sewed it on as a tuck spot. And this is a piece of ephemera that I had made a while ago out of craft books. So I made a little book, and it just has pages from craft books. You can glue stuff in it. You can glue a piece of paper that you can write on. Whatever you want to do to it would be fun. And this is a piece of a vintage sheet with the elastic right there. Some seam binding, just a piece of fabric there. A window envelope, and there's a little strip of fabric with a Queen Elizabeth stamp that is adhered to the envelope and postmarked. This is from this book. I punched a hole here and added an eyelet or reinforcement, and added some yarn from a vintage embroidery kit that I had gotten at a flea market. This is from a vintage magazine. I stabilized it with some more pages from this book and a piece of scrapbook paper down the center, and then washi tape. And I added this cardstock tab to it. There's just a strip of fabric there. This is the fly leaf that matches the end papers, and there's some feed sack fabric sewn on there. And this is a calendar page from a Currier and Ives calendar from, I think it's 1980 something. I don't see the date on it, but I think, oh, there it is, 1984. And on this side of it, I just sewed some pages that you can, it's only one, it's kind of thick. So this is an agenda for the week. You can write down what you need to do for the week, or write down a synopsis of what happened on those days during the week. And then just a piece of paper there with some pretty pictures. Again, we have a page from the book with the yarn and the reinforcement. This is a pattern piece, a vintage pattern piece that I just glued to the edge of the paper. These were sent to me in a Happy Mail. I love, love, love these. She sent me quite a few of them. They're petals to make a Dresden plate quilt. So I sewed two of them together and then pressed them and just sewed them on as a fabric flip with a piece of this trim here. And this might have come from the same person, I don't remember. But I know it came in a Happy Mail. These These are stencil designs. I didn't point them out to you, but on the fly leaves of both of the books, I used these quilting stencils and just rubbed ink through them. I'm going to send one stencil with each book, so you can do what you like with it. This is a vintage pattern envelope it's actually an embroidery transfer envelope, and it had the transfers inside it, but I just sewed the flap to that side, and you can flip it open and put something inside. I included a large card in there for you, but you can put what you'd like in there. There's a little fabric flip. I added a vintage daisy applique. A vintage bias tape wrapper I sewed on as a pocket. There's just a little piece of fabric there. A tag that I made, and here's one of the Amish little mini postcards that came in a little book with the plastic comb binding. I took it apart and I included quite a few of these cards, several anyway, of these cards in each journal, because the journals feature quilts, and you know the Amish are famous for their quilts, so I decided this was a good place to use those cards. I've had them for quite some time. This is the back of the envelope, and it has, these came out of a photo album, and these are to write about the pictures that you put in, and a yo-yo. That's not a vintage yo-yo. Here we have a vintage linen with embroidery on it, some cross stitch, and I made a pocket out of it with some more of that trim that was sent to me. And I included one of my yarn sample cards that I got at the flea market. You can write on the back of it. I should probably erase this. It's got the vendor's information and price on it. I kept buying these. They were $1.25 each card. And every time I went, I would buy a couple more. I've used them in domestic arts journals before, and I have a few left. I just love them. They're just such a cool element to add. A surprise when you turn the page. I did glue down some of the embroidery transfers onto some of these pages for decoration. Oh, this was the first. We just did the first signature. All right, second signature has another of the wrappers. This says Lacy Edge, and it was torn a little bit, so I just put some washi tape on it. And this is a catalog card. I just sewed some fabric to the top, and you can write on the back of it. And another of the Amish postcards. There's a couple of girls in the little cart being pulled by the horse. It looks like they're having a barn raising there. This is just some cardstock with a strip of fabric sewn to it, and there's a vintage snap card included in it. There's some of that stenciling. And another of the Dresden plate flips on a calendar page. This one has a stamp of a rooster on it. I don't remember if I remembered to put stamps on the envelopes in the other book. I'll have to check that out. This one has a lot of different pieces pieced together on this page. I like the way it looks. I love that rose. And here we have a hook and eye card as a pocket, and this is a vintage magazine page. This is a tag I made out of leftover strips of paper, and I've got to glue that down. I glued all this. I made these a while ago, and I just glued scraps down to index cards and then cut them up. That piece was coming up. Just make sure there's no glue on there to stick so I can put it back. I think that's where this came out of. This is an image from the book. It's a framed photo, but it has a patchwork quilt frame on it, or matting on it, or whatever. This is a card that came in a set of cards about walking around New York City. And it was a really cool set. If you lived in New York City or were visiting for an extended length of time, these cards would be really fun. Just take a card and go visit the sites that it talks about. And it's got some fabric sewn on it and some paper that you can write on. One of the images from the book, a page from the book. This is also a page from the book, and it's glued to the other side of that magazine paper. This is a vintage ribbon spool end. And here's a journaling card that I made with an image from a vintage magazine and an Amish card and just a playing card. There's another playing card sewn there with a piece of pattern, sewing pattern tissue. A fabric clip with another vintage applique. This is the page from the binder. And I sewed this little art card on it with some trim and added this card shaped like a jar in there to journal on. This just has a couple pieces of beadsack fabric sewn to it. This calendar page is from 1986. I got a couple of those Courier Knives calendar pages. This is a wide bias tape, seam binding, bias tape, bias tape that I did some decorative stitching on and added a yo-yo. Some vintage embroidery here with a little bit of crocheted edging. Somebody sent that piece to me. I appreciate all of the happy mails that you guys like to send me, and I love using your pieces in the journals that I make, and I don't remember who sent what, but I just remember I do appreciate you, and I show the happy mails when I get them and let people know where I got them. But then when I go to use them, I don't remember who sent them. So this one is gingham pieces that were scraps, and I sewed them all together to make a large pocket. And I sewed this piece of a linen calendar. It was the kind you would hang up in your kitchen. This is the February piece. And this is just a card that I had made a long time ago and used it as a divider in something that I no longer use, and it's embossed with a Tim Holtz embossing folder. And the third signature, this one has a vintage, no, this one is a coffee dyed index card, and I added a tab to it. I stamped my, I think her name is something Sugar Baker, but she has a bag of sugar and a cookbook and rolling pin and stuff, but she's just a country girl, and I think she's really cute. I think it was a Stampington and Company stamp that I bought a long time ago. And since this is a domestic arts book, I thought she was great to use in here. This one is a plant card that has pages from guest check pad in there and some fabric. There's a piece of beadsack fabric here with a vintage button sewn on with some orange floss. And there is, both sides here have the embroidery transfer glued down. This little piece was shorter than the other pieces that I sewed on, but I left it there for some interest. Here's a page from the book. There's a quilted pillow there. And a pocket that I made. This is a strip of corrugated cardstock, a little punch out, just a piece of leftover cardstock, and another of those jar cards. This is vellum grid paper for an engineer, architect, or somebody. I have a large tablet. It's not thick, but it's large, so it's not a whole lot of sheets of paper in it. This is from the knitting book. There's a categories card sewn on here with some fabric. A magazine page again with the calendar, the linen calendar sewn on here with a piece of crochet, a little tab, an Amish card, and this is an advertisement from the Work Basket magazine, vintage. It's a pretty quilted bedspread, blue and white bedspread. There's a pretty piece of fabric with these cute little girls that I sewed on the edge. Here's one of those Dresden plate thingies, and I'm looking for my stamps because I want to put a stamp there. I'm going to keep an eye open for my places that I forgot to include a stamp. I think I'll put a flower one there. I see an orange poppy that'll go well with this. And this one, the back of that envelope, oh, there's a long playing card sewn on the flap. And the back of it has a shopping list from, I think that's probably from the 70s or 80s. It's from the current catalog. And some vintage fabrics. These are feed sack, and this was part of a patchwork piece. You can see there are two pieces pieced together, and this is from my really old yo-yo quilt that I got. A vintage tea towel that matches the vintage tablecloth that I had made journals out of. And after I had made some journals out of this really fun tablecloth, somebody sent me a tea towel that exactly matched it. This is just a piece of ruffled twill that I had gotten at Hobby Lobby. This is a photo sleeve. It's got the part right here that goes into the album. There's a little hole, so it's sealed right here. And so it's open behind it. And of course the sleeve itself is open, but I put a card in the sleeve itself. This is where it's sealed, but you could put something behind it also if you want. More of the petals, and this has the bias tape on it. And another one with some pieced together scrapbook papers. This came with that grocery list from the current catalog. And here's an Amish horse and buggy waiting for the train to go by. And just a tabbed index card. This is a postcard of Upper Peninsula, Michigan, which I got in a Happy Mail not too long ago. And, oh, sewing pattern tissue. This is a patchwork piece. Vintage, and I made it into a pocket and added a yo-yo. And this is from a 1980s pattern catalog, and it was showing patterns for curtains. I folded it, or just put them together and sewed them together to make a pocket, and included this library card with a tab at the top. And I just put that in the pocket. This had hearts punched out of it, and I should have put them at the top. I don't know. I think I might have turned it around upside down or something, but I ended up sewing the pocket there, but you can see the pocket through the hearts. Here's the back. It has a little card here about memory. I cannot read it. The printing is so small, but I think this came from Tracy Fox, if I'm not mistaken. And I used a vintage library pocket, and I'm running low on the vintage library pockets because I'm not buying so many old library books. But I added this from a vintage crochet book, some washi tape, and just put a library card in it. And there will probably be some extras that I can include with that, along with the stencil. So now I will quickly go through this one. This one is called the Country Patchwork and Quilting Book. And here's the fabrics that I used to make the tie. It has a vintage embroidered trim on the edges, which is so pretty. I love it. Look at that gorgeous piece of fabric. Somebody sent that to me. Somebody sent me this one also. So there's a lot of Happy Mail ingredients in these books, along with my flea market finds. I just think that's so pretty, and it was quite thick, and I wrapped it all the way around, so it's a thick spine. And I added the vintage purple pom-pom here, a vintage yo-yo from my vintage quilt, vintage triangle fabrics that I had gotten at a yard sale, and some white and purple rickrack, and then this vintage pom-pom fringe trim, which I also got at the same yard sale as that, or flea market or whatever, but I didn't have a lot of the fringed pom-pom, but I love it, and I thought it was perfect on this. And I just added a fabric triangle here to cover up the ISBN number. You can still read it through there if you want to. So on the inside is another Rachel label and an image cut from the book. I glued it to craft cardstock, and another quilt card. This is cut from one of those, from that linen calendar that I was using the pieces from. It says "Bless this house." I just added a piece of fabric. So it has a lot of the same elements. This book has a set of these little grid cards that I stamped a long time ago, and they go Monday through Sunday. So they go all the way through the book, and you can take them and gather them together in one place and put 1 week together, or whatever you want to do with them, but they are scattered from front to back in the book. And also these pages I had put together, some of these pages, a long time ago. The ones with white stitching I did a while ago, and the ones with black stitching I just did. But I had done them in a different way so that they ended up having various tuck spots in surprise places. So I just put a little card in there. This is the one that has the vintage pom-pom ring. So I'm sure this came attached right there, but it's stuck on here, and I'm sure you can pull it off and actually use it if you want to. It has instructions on how to make a pom-pom. This is the fly leaf for this, and I used a selvage edge of a fabric on the edge there, and the stenciling. This is a copy of a needle card and a little tag that I made with a real vintage milk bottle cap. This is a vintage magazine advertising ketchup. And this is a pillow, a little pincushion project that was in this book. So again, I glued it to cardstock, and another of those New York City cards with fabric sewn around it and some papers that you can write on. There's the Dresden plate flip, crochet or the knitting book, log cabin book. Here's my playing cards with the little house with the pink roof. This is a little flip. It's a little tiny piece of the calendar, linen calendar, with a vintage applique glued onto it. Little pom-pom there. Okay, here I have a Czechoslovakian stamp that I can glue there. It fell out of the binder when I was getting the others, so I'll use it. And another ribbon spool end. Here's one of those cards that I stamped. Pennsylvania Dutch signs. And another of those patchwork tags that I made. There's a gingham pocket pieced together, and I forgot to mention I put a eyelet, or I punched a hole and used a reinforcement, and then added one of these bulb pins with a button and a charm. Somebody had sent those to me, so I was able to use a couple of those. There's a piece of the linen napkin or calendar, and one of these divider cards that I made. There's the transfer. And again, this piece was shorter, but I left it that way. Patchwork pocket, and this is a card that I'd purchased a couple years ago at the flea market with a house on it. and I just sewed some fabric across the top. This is the grid architect paper, engineer's paper, whatever. Probably covered the stamp spot with that. There's another unexpected tuck spot, so there's an Amish card. This was actually the cover of that postcard book. And apparently I paid $1 for that postcard book. I've had it for several years, and I'm glad I'm getting to use it. Again, another pin cushion. This is from a children's book, Making Paper Dolls. So it's a crafty image. I love those old images from the 30s. Another embroidery transfer envelope. This one had some tears, so I put some washi tape on it and included this photo mat from a mini album that I had made and never did anything with. I took it apart, and I've been using parts of it in various books, so here's one. Here is a piece from an old, I think it was a lap robe that somebody made, just squares sewn together, and it's got the backing on it. And I had this poodle applique, so I just glued him on. Thought it was cute. There's a really pretty playing card in a piece of sewing pattern. Another Amish card with some children. The fabric flipped there with the petals. This one has pocket from that same embroidered piece, and a long pocket, or a long envelope made from a window envelope with this really big window. I thought that was so cool. And I took a piece from a vintage craft book and sewed this piece on for journaling, and left this here and sewed a piece of fabric and a button there. So this tab sticks up above the book, so you'll see that. And there's the transfer glued on. And the third signature has another of, this one is a vintage card, and the tab got torn off, so I added this tab. Feed sack fabric and a button, but it's got my sugar baker stamp on it. And a plant card with guest checks. A patchwork pocket that I made with scraps and a little piece of fabric, and a jar card. Feed sack fabric again, and a yo-yo. This is an interesting little pack. It was something made from, oh, I forgot the name of the company, and you can't see it here, but it was all messed up. It had a bright orange sticker that was half peeled off, and you could see the gummy part of the sticker that was left behind. But I really liked it because it was like a pocket, and it had this little flap, and it wasn't a pocket, it had whatever in it, seam binding or whatever was in it, but it kind of wrapped around it, and it had this little flap that the retailer could hang it with, or just leave it folded down and put it in a slot. But I had to kind of doctor it up because of the ugly front of it. So I cut off key pieces of it, covered it, made it wider, and just added those pieces. I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool. And then this is just a tag that I had, and it fits in there. I had to have something that would not stick up beyond that. And I like that the yarn sticks out there. This is a piece of vintage trim. For this calendar page, I didn't cut it in half like I did the others. I just folded it. There's a lot of different pieces on this page. Vintage feed sack on the flyleaf with some stenciling. This is from a vintage piece of fabric. I'm not sure what it was, from the kitchen apparently, and it's got some narrow bias tape sewn around it. It's really hard to sew bias tape on a curve like that. And some vintage trim. And another fabric, plastic photo sleeve, and this one had the opening here. I don't know why it was different. Maybe it's from a different book. But anyway, the hole is up there. This is just a piece of cardstock that I cut in the shape of a peg. Playing card. This is a little children's card with a house on it. Let's put a stamp up there. It says U.S. postage paid. I was kind of hoping to do a couple more of these journals, but I don't know. I'm ready to clean the mess up. But that's why I wanted to make more, because I already have the mess out. I've got things laid in piles in my office, and I've got stuff out here in here, so I could make a couple more while I have all the stuff out, but I don't know that I'm going to. I think what I need to do is actually take my sewing machine to get it adjusted, but I called the quilt shop in the valley in my area here that I was told this is that lap robe, or another lap robe, transfer yo-yo, and another one of the pockets that I made from the pattern book. And I'll get back to my sewing machine issues, but you can see I sewed a fancy stitch across the top there. This is another yarn sample card, but I had to doctor this up too. Trying to find, I have another one, here it is. This is what it looked like, and it was a large card, and I cut them in half. But then it's still so big, I ended up taking the back off it and removing the card with the yarn on it and trimming down the other part. And I actually had to remove one of the rows of yarn to make it shorter. And then I glued this down to manila folder and then glued this part down to manila folder. So I got rid of all of this and some of the yarn and the back of it. But I made a yarn card for you, so you can write on the back. And again, we have another little card from Tracy. It says memento, and a vintage library pocket that I had already collaged on in a library card. So I called about my sewing machine and about if they would take it and adjust it. And she said, yeah, they do it. And then she asked me what kind of machine I had, and then she asked me if I bought it at a big box store, which I didn't think it really mattered where I bought it. I told her I got it at Joann's, and she said, well, she doesn't fix Joann's machines from there. I was like, why not? Joann's won't fix them. She said they're made, and apparently it's with all the big box store sewing machines, but they have rivets instead of screws, so you can't make adjustments. And something about they don't have a frame, must be inside, I don't know. So when you think you're getting a good deal on a sewing machine, you're actually just buying a cheaply made sewing machine that can't be fixed, apparently. It's very frustrating, but she said she'd take a look at it. But she's 5 or 6 weeks out. She has so many waiting. But I did a lot of sewing in these books, and I know I need to take my machine and get it adjusted if they can do it. So I don't think I'm going to make any more of these till I get my machine fixed. So I have to take it, and I'll be without it for 5 to 6 weeks, and then I don't even know if she can fix it after she gets the chance to look at it. I have 2 of them, so I have to get the other one out and try it and see what was wrong with that one. Once I get one of them looked at, I can take the other one if she'll look at it, you know? It's kind of a bummer. I don't want to have to buy an expensive sewing machine. I feel like I'm always having to buy something big so I can keep doing my craft, like a new printer. So anyway, I don't know. So I'll have to do some stuff that doesn't require sewing machines. So I'm thinking maybe I could make book covers, get them prepped. I can make glue books. I can make a journal complete without my sewing machine, but not one of these. So anyway, back to what we're doing here. Don't want to forget this. These 2 journals will be in my shop today, the day this video goes up, which is Monday, at 6, did I say 6? I think I said 6. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll put it in the description, the correct time. I'm pretty sure I said 6 at the beginning of the video. And I will also link my shop below. I would love to hear what you think about these sorry, that was a voicemail that startled me. I'd like to know what you think about these fun, eclectic journals with all kinds of stuff thrown in them. They're great fun to make. I love them. I hope you love them. I like flipping through them and looking at them, and I just think they're yummy. So I'd like to know what you think of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.